Hello, and welcome to the ALCTS webinar on accessibility, what is happening now online, on campus, and within the marketplace. This session serves as the second in our two-part virtual pre-conference on the road to electronic information accessibility, how do we increase student success? I'm Erin Elzy, and I will be your host for today's webinar. As part of this webinar, we will have 3 presentations today. The first, What's in a Name, the Online Accessibility Center, will be presented by Damita Burner. Damita is the Director of the Online Accessibility Center at Southern New Hampshire for the College of Online and Continuing Education. She has worked in disability services since 2014 and has a combined time of 19 years working in higher education in various roles as an instructor, counselor, program manager, and education technician. Damita is an Air Force veteran and loves working with the students who are underrepresented and underserved. She believes in the transformative power of education and often seeks opportunities to mentor young people. The second presentation, Enabling Campus Student Success, Bridging the Gap Between IT and Disability Services, will be given by Aaron Flint. Aaron is IT Manager of Instructional Support Services at Southern New Hampshire University. In this role, he works with his team to promote the appropriate and effective use of academic technologies on campus and across the university. Aaron is an adjunct instructor in the social sciences at SNHU and in biological sciences at NHTI. In his 19 years of teaching, he has also taught healthcare management and policy, human resources management, educational technology, and has been a guest lecturer for the Forensic Accounting Program. Aaron holds a Master of Arts in Social Policy from Brandeis University and a Master's of Healthcare Administration from the University of New Hampshire and a Bachelor of Arts in Biology from St. Anselm College. His research interests focus on aging and disability policy, accessibility, and universal design. Third, we will have Jill Power and her presentation on striving for accessible content, It Takes a Village. Jill has over 15 years of experience in both product management and library services. At EBSCO, she has made it her mission to understand the users, any assistive technologies they leverage, and the way they access information and conduct research. She is an advocate for accessibility at EBSCO and for ensuring a continuous approach to making all their products available to all users. A few logistics for today's presentations. All attendees are muted to prevent background noise, and we do not have interactive chat capabilities. You may, however, comment on today's presentation using Twitter. The hashtag is ALCTSAC18. We do not monitor the Twitter feed, so if you have questions for our presenters, please type them into the question box on your screen. We will have time for questions at the end of all 3 presentations, so if your question is for a specific presenter, please be sure to include their name in your question. If we do not get to your question, our presenters have kindly agreed to answer remaining questions in writing, which will be sent out to all attendees. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email with links to the recording and presentation slides shortly after the presentation concludes. And before we get started, the ALCTS Continuing Education Committee would like to give an extra special thank you to our co-sponsor for this week's virtual pre-conference sessions, the ALCTS CMS Collections Development Librarians of Academic Libraries Interest Group. And now we'll start with Damita. There will be a slight delay as we change presenters.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Damita Burner, and I am the Director of the Online Accessibility Center, formerly known as the Disability Resource Center here at Southern New Hampshire University, College of Continuing Education. Thank you to the ALCTS for hosting and to our library team for logistics and other partners who've been so gracious with your time. I'm so excited to be a part of the second day of this pre-conference. What I would like to share with you is really our story, our accessibility journey into changing our name. And what I'll talk to you about today is the foundation of what we do to support students. Some quick facts. I'm sorry, I'm going a little fast here. Changing our name, lessons learned, and how partnership is the only way. On this slide, for those viewing, you will see that there is a hand, and that hand has the word disability written across the screen, but the letters DIS are crossed through, focusing only on ability. I think this is a great segue into the foundation of how we support our students and what do we actually do to provide access for students with disabilities. The goal of the OAC is to provide access to educational resources for students with disabilities where their access may be limited, and we have to think about those standard formats that may not be applicable for the student. We have been very creative in our approach to thinking about students and their particular needs. It's important to also note that in our space, we support many, many, many students, and there is not a cookie cutter approach to how we support our students. We have an interactive, ongoing process with our students to ensure that their needs are met, and sometimes their needs will change based on the course or based on how their disability impacts them. But what we do guarantee is to make sure that we're having those conversations, that we have the communication with the students to support them. When I think about, I'm not sure why this is moving along so quickly here, but my apologies for that. Who do we support? We support students who are using screen reading technology, students who may be blind or visually impaired. We also support students who have a learning or cognitive disability. In those cases, they may also be using text-to-speech technology. We also have students who have print disabilities or limitations with the amount of time that they can view the computer. In these areas, there may be cognitive or neurological disabilities. Students may have seizures and migraines depending on their exposure to the computer screen. We also support students who are deaf or hard of hearing. In this case, we support them through captioning of transcripts, audio-video content, communication access, real-time transaction cart services for real-time events. But again, these are just some examples of the types of services and support that we give to students. But again, we're very creative. We think outside of the box in terms of how we support our students. Let me give you some quick facts about the team and also about the students that we're serving. So the team, the Disability Resource Center, was created in September of 2014. Prior to this time, online students were being supported by our campus partners, the Disability Office on campus. In January of 2017, there was a reorg, if you will. The team went from student success to academic. So we're now under the academic leadership model. September of 2017, we officially changed our name. We changed our name from the Disability Resource Center to the Online Accessibility Center. And this is where I'm going to spend some time and share with you how we came to the name and the process that got us there. May 2018 current information, we're almost at 2,000 students registered with our office. About 80% of those students registered with us receive accommodations and or alternate format for their course materials. So we're very busy. We have a very exciting time ahead of us. We have a number of changes and ways that we've been growing our team and thinking about accessibility solutions and how we support our students. So this is a very exciting time for us. So let's talk about the process itself. How did we change our name? On the screen, you have a young lady looking at a computer screen, and this young lady represents students. Every single thing that we do is focused around our students and how we support them in the best manner possible. So, in thinking about this name change, um, thinking about the ways that we can garner awareness, the ways in which we can support our students and have those conversations. So the process included a goal, a timeline, thinking about our audience, and also some action items. We wanted to keep the goal in front of us. Um, as I had mentioned before, the goal always centers around the student. Why were we changing our name? Our name was changed to better support our students. Our name was changed to remove any barriers or stigma that would prevent students from approaching us. Our name was changed to create some excitement and awareness at the university so that other people could start to have those conversations without hesitation. We also were keeping up with what was trending and what other universities were doing. And we also thought that the current name at that time, Disability Resource Center, did not really speak to what we were doing and the way in which we were doing it. We also wanted to make sure that people were aware that if a student had an accessibility issue, that they could come and talk to us. Sometimes there was a perception that it had to be a severe disability in order for services to be provided. So with that goal in mind, we went about the task of thinking about a timeline. How long would it take us to get this done? Who needed to be involved? And so we thought about the fall of that year because we knew that we would have a lot of students. We knew there was a lot of excitement around the fall term start. So we had a timeline, but we also allowed some flexibility to make sure that we addressed any gaps. We wanted to make sure that we were not butting head with other significant changes that were happening at the university, but we had an amazing communications expert, if you will, who really helped us chart out a plan for making this change so that it was well received. When I also think about the audience and those who were involved, again, students were at the top of our list, but we also considered making sure that our senior leadership was on board, that they were receptive and supportive of this change. We also made sure that in the life cycle of the student, every person that had a process with the student also were on board because we wanted them to have those conversations. We wanted them to be able to be expressive and excited about sharing the new name change. So when I think about the audience, it was everyone along the life cycle of the student, from the point of admission up until they graduated. Who would need to be involved? Who would need to know? And who would help carry these conversations forward? And then we also came up with our action items. We had a communication plan. We wanted to make sure that we were exposing the name change in all the different venues in which we communicated messages, whether it was electronic, it was email, presentations, and whatever avenue that existed, we wanted to make sure that we got the information out. The other action steps included making sure that we had audits. Where does the name live? And you would be amazed of all the ways in which the name exists, and sometimes you're not even aware. In the correspondence and any collateral, any print materials, web services, we had quite a few hands who were helping us audit the number of places in which the old name lived. And also those people, partners I should call them really, were also responsive in helping us remove those names and make those changes. Action items also included what was going to be a launch, what was an event or something that we could share that really highlighted the name change. That fall, we also had an accessibility awareness event. We had set up a table in which people could stop and talk to us, and we could gladly share our new name. We also asked for people to sign their expression of accessibility, what it meant to them, and we have continued this excitement and this enthusiasm around our name change. But it wasn't a very simple process. I know sometimes there's the idea that, oh, it's a simple change. You changed your name. Believe me, there's quite a bit involved in changing your name. There's quite a bit of hands involved. There's a lot of communication. But again, always going back to why we changed our name, kept us centered around the purpose and what the overall goal was, which was to better support our students. So in supporting our students, I've always said that I love the idea of establishing friendships or those partnerships along the way, as we don't do our job solely by ourselves. We depend on the network and support of some amazing partnerships. And when I think of those partnerships, I have to give them credit for helping us, enabling us to make the name change, and also for making that name stick. There will be some students who engage with us who will only know us as the Online Accessibility Center. They will never know about the Disability Resource Center, but we also have students who've been around for a while and they know both of those names. But when I talk about the partnership, it's crucial that we maintain those relationships and that I give credit where credit is due. At the university, we made a point of collaborating with other teams, other individuals where accessibility and the goal of accessibility potentially impacts them. Sometimes there's a direct impact and sometimes it's indirect, but we have brought on as many people as we can to make sure that there's an ambassadorship, if you will, and that everyone is responsible for accessibility. When I think of from the time that the team was formed in 2014 until now, and the growth that we've had, the number of success that we've had with promoting accessibility and making sure that our students have an equitable experience, I'm so thrilled to share with you that, again, much of that has been to the credit of an amazing team, which, by the way, our team right now consists of 9 people who are supporting almost 2,000 students. And I can't say enough about the dedication, the investment, and the passion of this team. They have gone out and they have had those conversations. They've brought awareness to accessibility. They've brought awareness around the idea that our students want to be included, that they want to have an experience that sets them up for maybe a new career. They've had the conversations about our students, our parents, and they're going to school and they're juggling jobs, they're making career changes. They have been instrumental in making sure that our students are not only supported, but they're also included. So the accessibility ambassadors, I've thought for some time about some type of award or some type of a recognition for all the people who support us. I know this list is not exhaustive, but I started to think about who are the people that we've come in contact with who really not only partnered with us, but have said basically that we're in this for the long haul. We're going to support you, and we're also looking forward to what's going to happen next. What's the next phase of the OAC? Where do we take this conversation? The next iteration of accessibility here in the online space. And again, thinking about the life cycle of a student, I started with admissions right away, advising, academics, learning resources, the online writing center, instructional designers, our faculty, subject matter experts, IT, our library, our legal team, our campus accessibility center, who, by the way, also changed their name. So we now have both offices have changed their name. Our marketing team, student financial services, vendors. There's a host of so many other people that I'm sure that I have not called out. But these forums, this type of webinar and presentations and other ways that we can engage and support our students is so important. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk to you about our story, our accessibility journey, and how we changed our name. You may not be at a point where you're thinking about changing your name. And if so, that's fine. I know that words have power. And as you are thinking about accessibility, what's been really exciting to me is that other people, some of the people listed here, have been able to say, I've been in a meeting and I've asked the question about accessibility, or I've been the person who's purchased software or some piece of technology, and I've asked about accessibility of this product. Is it going to work for students with disabilities? Again, where our students are currently, they're fully supported. I know that the university has been um, amazing, really, at being able to lift us up, to lift up the OAC, and also say, or give us the support that we need to make some of these changes. We have a number of projects that we're working on to make sure that we've covered those gaps. And we're looking forward to just having more and more conversations. In doing this, we've certainly learned quite a bit, and those lessons I would love to share with you. So on this screen, you have a picture. There's two hands holding what looks like a tablet or some type of device with a stylus. So what did we learn in this process? Well, what I would share is that involve your stakeholders more, as often as you can, and even the people that you think would not be impacted by a name change, I would say add them. Sometimes different perspectives, sometimes those things that you just haven't thought about may come up from involving different people. The what ifs. Well, have you tried this or have you thought about that? But one of the lessons learned would be to involve your stakeholders as much as you can. I cannot emphasize enough how much communication is so very important. Um, and communicate in all the different ways in which you can. Written communication, verbal communication, whatever those news feeds are that you have at the library, at your university, or wherever it may be, you cannot over communicate this type of change. I still have people who approach me and will say, oh, I didn't know that you had changed your name. I just saw some type of correspondence and realized that you changed your name. So over communicate if you have to, but make sure that you think about all those places where you could possibly get this message in front of people. I would also ask that you would audit, and have as many eyes as you can on the old name. And we're still finding places where it kind of pops up and it's like, wow, I didn't even realize that the old name lived in this material. Think about all the places in which people would be communicating that name. And again, we've been fortunate that other people have brought it to our attention. Other teams have said, hey, I saw that the Disability Resource Center, that name is still in a syllabus. And I'm thankful for that because, again, people are aware, they know that we've changed our name and they're helping us find all of those places. But when you audit, think about every possible location that name may be referenced. that may be pointed to in some type of material. And then lastly, follow up. I would say a lesson learned here would be maybe a survey of some type to ask about people's perceptions. Did it change? We know that verbally that people have come to us and said, wow, thank you for changing your name. The name feels much better. There's not so much of a stigma or barrier for students approaching our office. We've had that verbal confirmation, but maybe something as simple as a survey, but some type of follow-up, even with our staff members and our students, to have a more formalized confirmation that we move in the right direction. I have no doubt that we did. If this were to come up again, I would definitely incorporate some of these final pieces here for follow-up. Lastly, I would like to thank all of the people that have been so amazing in supporting this team. Again, we have an incredible network. It's really hard work, it's rewarding work, but we know that together there's teamwork amongst the people who are committed to making sure that students have access to a transformative educational experience. If you wanted to engage with us, if you wanted to talk to us more about this, we are very passionate. None of us are shy about talking about our commitment to accessibility, accessibility solutions. We confer, consult. We're a resource to the university and anyone who's interested. But I hope that you've been able to take away just one simple idea, a simple act, and just the type of magnitude that act can have, and also that it stirs even your own conversations around accessibility and how we want to ensure that all of our students, all learners, have an equitable experience. Thank you so much for listening.
Great, thank you, Damita. Next up, we'll have Aaron Flint, and again, we'll have a slight delay as we change presenters.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure being with you this afternoon. My name is Aaron Flint, and I am the IT Director of Instructional Support Services at Southern New Hampshire University. Today, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking to you about the relationship between my team, Instructional Support, and the rest of the university. Okay. I've been with Southern New Hampshire University for about 18 years. Within the IT organization, and during that time, my team has had a very close relationship with what was formerly the Office of Disability Services, which is now the Campus Accessibility Center. Throughout this presentation, we'll talk a little bit about how we work with the folks over there to promote student success. In the early years when I was here, we used to have an ADA 504 advisory committee. That was in the early years of the Disability Services Organization, and as that organization grew, the staff grew, we formalized some processes. That went away, and now my team is working more on a collaborative mode with them. So the team that I manage is a tiny little division of ITS. The Southern New Hampshire University ITS organization currently has about 200 staff. We are a staff of 6. That staff consists of myself. We have an assistive technology and accessibility consultant. This is a relatively new position, almost a year old. Currently staffed by an individual who worked on the help desk who had an interest and an experience with accessibility issues. We realized that there was a gap in our IT organization as far as the support of disability issues and accessibility, so this position was created to help try to fill that gap. The instructional support team also consists of 3 instructional technology consultants who primarily work with faculty. Many of them teach, have an experience, years of experience in instructional design and so forth. We have a new staff member that just started this week. We have an instructional support coordinator who will be student focused in her role. In the past, most of our support has been faculty focused, but we're trying to branch out there as well. We also work with several student workers each year. We typically have between 5 and 7 work study students that work for us, and those students do also tend to be referred from our Campus Accessibility Center. So we have had students in the past with visual accessibility issues, physical accessibility issues, and so forth. And their skills have been very valuable in our accessibility work. Just to give you a little bit of a background of what we do. The instructional support name is a little bit misleading. That's why it's the IT instructional support organization. We basically provide support for all of the academic technologies that are used across campus. While our team is located on campus and our primary focus is the campus student and the campus faculty, we do also provide a fair bit of support for our online students as well. These are some of the key academic technologies that we support. However, when I ran our list the other day, we support about 40 or so different academic technologies. Working on campus with our campus faculty who have the academic freedom to try pretty much whatever they want, we will support virtually any academic technology that they come to us with. We work not only closely with our faculty and our students, which we'll talk about shortly, but also with the different vendors that are here to make sure that their products are accessible, that we have the materials and resources to share with our students and our faculty. A good example of that is one of the tools that we support is CourseEval. CourseEval is our course evaluation system where all of our course evaluations throughout the university are provided online. Within the last year, we were notified by one of our students who uses JAWS as their screen reader that there was a problem with CourseEval. It wasn't working as expected. The combo boxes that were used for some of the questions weren't behaving as they should when the students were using the key commands for JAWS. So we worked with CourseEval to get that updated and get their product improved so that it would work more effectively with our students with visual impairments. Give you a little bit of background in addition to what we do in instructional support, but also the Campus Accessibility Center. Give you a little bit of a background on their statistics. So the Campus Accessibility Center currently has 4 full-time staff members and a series of student workers who assist them with some of the technical things. We've seen consistent, steady growth in the number of on-campus students who have reported various disabilities. Largest chunk of our students with disabilities come from the learning disability and the ADD, ADHD spectrums, and we have a growing number of students with chronic health conditions. The Campus Accessibility Center works with all of those students to make sure that they get the appropriate accommodations, whether that be academic, housing, dietary, transportation, or library. And then the instructional support team will help support them in whatever they need in that area. We've seen the number of students that are coming in increase regularly over the last several years, but we're also seeing the requests for different types of supportive academic services increase. So the next few slides will just kind of give you some scope there. So the Campus Accessibility Center provides accessible textbooks to those students who need it. That could be textbooks that are in electronic format provided by the publishers. As more and more publishers are providing e-texts, that's getting easier than it used to be. But we are seeing that the numbers have increased from 49 accessible textbook requests a few years ago, up to 133 this year. And that would involve the Campus Accessibility Center working with publishers to get electronic versions. And if it's a text that there is no electronic version available, Campus Accessibility Center would work to basically rip apart a print book, scan it, and make that accessible and available to the students. Campus Accessibility Center also provides test proctoring, and that number has been increasing quite steadily as well. Some of the students that are being monitored by the Campus Accessibility Center do require limited distraction or no distraction testing. Some of that is proctored, and so trying to accommodate that growing number of requests has been a bit of a challenge. We'll talk about some of the ways that instructional support is trying to help with that moving forward. Okay. Campus Accessibility Center is also responsible for the accessible van. We have a handicapped accessible van on campus that is managed and run by the Campus Accessibility Center that will take students around campus, off campus as needed. So the number of uses, number of trips, number of usages for that has also been increasing quite steadily. So the demand on the Campus Accessibility Center is growing steadily as we see more students coming to campus who have disabilities that they're disclosing, and also students who are becoming more comfortable with that. Okay. Campus Accessibility Center also manages note-taking. One of the accommodations that a number of students are eligible for is to have a note taker in class. And that can be done in a few different ways. We try to work so that students have different options. That could be having a student in class that will take notes for them. It may be making a smart pen available, and also some other options that we're looking at. So one of the things that you'll see on this chart is that in the 2016-2017 year, the numbers were somewhat low in that there was not a notes database. One of the challenges with the note-taking process is that students can be paid as a note taker to provide notes to students who need them. One of the challenges was trying to develop a tracking system. So instructional support worked with the Campus Accessibility Center to develop a process through which students who are note takers could take their notes, upload them to a site so that students who needed them could access them immediately. This would allow us to be able to track those students to make sure that, first off, the students who we were paying to take notes were actually doing that, and also give us the ability, or give the Campus Accessibility Center the ability to track the quality of those notes to make sure that they were being effective for the students. Okay. So I want to spend some time talking about how we support the different areas of the university to help students to be successful. So one of the areas that we support is the library. Currently, the instructional support team is located in the library. We're on the second floor of the library, right around the corner from the reference desk. Our relationship with the library and with the other areas of the university is pretty much an informal, collegial, and consultative role. We tend to not have a huge set of strict procedures that we follow. Although some of the processes, some of the things that we do, we are starting to formalize somewhat. We want it to be a relationship that is not mired down with forms and other strict procedures. We try to act as a resource to the library, whether it's the librarians or the patrons that are coming in. We provide a variety of different types of support to the library. Some of the things that we do are we provide accessibility assessments for new tools or databases. So anytime the library is looking at obtaining a new tool, if they would like us to review it and see how accessible it is, using a variety of the accessibility checkers, or perhaps testing it with JAWS and some of the other screen readers that we support, we can do that. We've also provided screen reader training for the library's reference librarians. One of the things that was noticed last year was that they were seeing an increase in the number of students in our online courses who were using screen readers and were having some problems accessing some of the databases. As sighted users, it's sometimes hard to support those types of things, because if you're not using a screen reader on a regular basis, or you don't really have a lot of experience with them, it's really hard to understand and troubleshoot some of those types of issues. So one of our student workers is legally blind. She is a heavy user of JAWS as well as refreshable Braille. And so we had her sit down with the reference librarians and provide a training for them, go through the library databases, go through the library website, and show them kind of what some of those challenges were. Give the reference librarians a better sense of what it's like for a blind user to access the databases, and identify some of the areas that could be improved. So that's something that we try to do, is whether it's through our full-time staff or through our student workers, is to provide that type of orientation and training as needed to address some of the issues. We also try to work with the library as well as others to promote new academic technologies and accessibility tools. The focus on accessibility lately, and the number of accessible tools that are out there has grown quite significantly over the last couple of years. So we spend a significant amount of time on my team working to identify what those technologies are, identify how they may benefit our campus community, and communicate that out to them. And that can be done through documentation, that can be done through training, or it can just be done through informal communications. We also try to work with the library to assist any students that are referred to us, whether that's a student that may have contacted the library through their live chat, or stopped in at the circulation desk or the reference counter, and they may have questions that are accessibility related, even academic technology related. We will assist any of those students. Oftentimes the librarians will just, if they're on site, walk them right around the corner to us in our office, and we will help them out with any of those types of things. So we try to do whatever we can to support the librarians and the students to make them successful. Okay. We also work to support the Campus Accessibility Center. So we have the Campus Accessibility Center, which is primarily serving our on-campus, usually traditional undergraduate age students. And we also do support the Online Accessibility Center to a different degree, but we do try to support everybody. Again, we do not have a formalized process here. One of the things that we do with the Campus Accessibility Center is we try to work with them to research new accessible technologies. The Campus Accessibility Center staff is very good at managing the students and managing their accommodations and so forth. And what we try to help them with is the technical aspect of things. So we look at some of the new accessible technologies. For instance, Sonocent. As we have developed a note-taking process, we are always looking at new technologies that are out there that may aid with that process. Because hiring students to be note takers, managing the process of getting notes from that person to the student that has requested them can be challenging. And we always try to make some of these services available in different ways, because we realize that not all students learn or work the same way. So we try to give options. So for note-taking, we've provided the traditional paper and pen. We've looked at the use of LiveScribe smart pens. And now we're looking at a tool called Sonocent, trying to do an evaluation of that note-taking tool to see how valuable that might be. We are looking at other tools. One is Equatio, which is a tool that helps students to make math equations accessible. We use their companion product, Read and Write Gold, from the company TextHelp, which we'll look at shortly. We've been using that for several years for students, and that's been very helpful. But one of the things that we've been hearing from both the Online Accessibility Center and the Campus Accessibility Center over the last year is that there seems to be an increasing need for accessible math tools. Equatio seems to be a good tool from our testing that helps students to be able to write equations, that helps us and our faculty be able to make mathematical equations that are accessible to students. So starting this summer, we are actually purchasing a site license for this tool and making it available to all of our students. We also look at other accessible technologies, and we're typically trying to look for tools that are easily accessible to the students, that are low cost or no cost, so that there's a low barrier to entry for them to be able to use those. Over the last couple of years, Microsoft has been making some incredible improvements in their accessible technologies. And as an Office 365 school with a heavy focus on Microsoft products, trying to get these things available to students has been very helpful. So some of the tools that we're looking at currently are Microsoft Translate. This is a very nice new add-in for PowerPoint that will allow faculty who are presenting using PowerPoint to actually have live dictated translations as they speak. Although it's primarily intended to be translated to other languages than English, it can be used for our international students, but it can also be used for students who may have a hearing impairment. We're also looking at some of the tools like Microsoft Seeing AI, where you can use your phone and it will describe scenes around you. One of the tools that we've also looked at is based out of some conversations that we had with the Campus Accessibility Center about campus tours and how would we handle a student with a hearing impairment who is on a campus tour, perhaps walking around with a group and needs to be able to hear what the tour guide is saying. So we evaluated a tool called I Can't Hear, which allows somebody who is on a mobile phone or a mobile device to actually get an on-screen translation of what the tour guide would be saying. So we've been evaluating a few different tools, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to develop basically a catalog of resources that are available. That's not something that we get a regular request for, but when we get those types of requests, it's nice to have a tool that's available for that. So we're trying to continually evaluate those accessible technologies so that when needs arise, we have access to solutions for people. So in addition to researching new accessibility technologies, we try to work with the Campus Accessibility Center to consult on processes. So last year, we developed a note-taking tracking system using our survey research tool called Qualtrics that, as I mentioned before, will allow the Campus Accessibility Center to better manage their note takers and note-taking process. So far, that seems to be working well, but we're continuing to look at ways to improve that. We also worked with them to develop a captioning process. Says, unlike the Damita's Office Online Accessibility Center, where they have a fairly formal process for getting videos captioned for the online courses, one of our challenges here on campus is that with faculty developing all of their own course material, it's a little bit harder to manage the captioning. So we've worked with the CAC to develop a captioning process where our accessibility consultant can work with them and with the faculty to make sure that all of the videos are captioned. This is an ongoing process. It seems to be working well, but as anything with faculty who develop their courses on their own, it can be a little bit challenging to get them to comply, but we're getting there. We also work with them to do consultations with current and prospective students. As needed, if we have a student who is coming in who may have specific technical needs, we can work with the Campus Accessibility Center and that student to help develop a plan or make sure that things will work effectively for them. And we also work with the CAC team to provide in-service training and updates on new tools. Again, Microsoft has been making some great improvements in the accessibility area, including the Office 365 Immersive Reader, the Accessibility Checker, and so forth. Okay. We also support students by providing them with accessible software. One of the tools that I mentioned before is Read and Write Gold. We provide a site license to students for that, and that's managed through the instructional support team. We have about 1,000 students a year that download that tool. That's great for varying levels of accessibility, from students with learning disabilities to visual impairments. And we provide technical support and training to that. We will be providing that with Equatio as well, and then also Office 365. We also support students by providing technical support, whether they're walk-ins, referrals from the library faculty. We get escalations from our help desk if it's an accessibility issue that the help desk can't support, because oftentimes accessibility technical issues can get pretty deep into the weeds, and we have staff that are familiar with those. We also get referrals from the Campus Accessibility Center and the Online Accessibility Center. A lot of these are around Read, Write Gold, JAWS, and some of those other things. And then we also provide student training as needed, typically on a one-to-one basis. We try to realize that one size does not fit all, and so we try to meet the needs of each student by providing options and customization. And we also support faculty in a number of different ways. We try to provide faculty with training on academic technologies with a focus on accessibility. That can include technical how-to, strategies for effective use of the different technologies. And we tend to do everything with our faculty one-on-one. So that we can focus our training on their specific discipline, because the way that we would teach an English professor is not the same way that we would teach an engineering professor. And we also try to focus on their particular delivery method, whether they're teaching an online course, face-to-face, or some other version. And we always try to have a focus on accessibility, so that if they're building their course content, that they make that accessible. We consult with them on course design. And we focus on their goals, their activities, how are they doing their assessment, what types of tools they're using. We try to make sure that we always focus on universal design and making sure that things are accessible. That could be captioning your videos, running the accessibility checker on your PowerPoint presentations or on your Word documents to make sure that everything you do will be accessible to students. And we work with them to promote captioning. We have the captioning process in place, and trying to promote that with faculty so that they are proactive and get that done ahead of time. It can be a challenge sometimes where a faculty member halfway through a semester will decide to show a video and not realize that captioning is not an instant process. And then we also provide technical support to the faculty as well on accessibility and any of the other academic technologies. So combined, we try to do all of these different things with the different audiences on campus to try and make sure that all of the course content is accessible and that students and faculty can be successful. And that is it for my presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Aaron. All right, so next up we will have Jill Power, and again there will be another slight delay as we change presenters.
Hello, everyone. This is Jill Power. I'm a product manager at EBSCO, and I'm so thrilled to be talking to you today about accessibility. It's one of my personal passions. I am an advocate at EBSCO for making our products accessible to all users, and I'm here today to talk about how content flows through many hands as it makes its way through to the user. So over the last couple of days, you've heard a lot from Southern New Hampshire University and how it's really taking their whole village to have accessibility work, across the organization. And here I'm talking a little bit about a broader village in terms of content and outside of the organization, all of the different hands that touch it before it even makes it over to the student, and how we're all partners in this ecosystem, as I'm calling it, of making our content accessible to users. So this is a checkbox that I have on the screen. It says, are your products fully compliant with Section 508 and or WCAG 2.0 AA? And yes or no. It's sort of a checkbox question, but it's really daunting. We've gotten this on our RFPs before, and as most of you probably know at this point, there's a lot of elements that go into creating a fully accessible environment. There's the variety of disabilities to consider, vision, hearing, learning, cognitive, mobility, and then the spectrum that all of these have. There's a number of devices, individuals who use multiple devices, as we probably all do, between our phone or a tablet or a desktop and the way we access information. And then there's a long range of different assistive technologies that different users have, and this playing field is constantly evolving and changing. I've even jotted down a few that I saw in Aaron's presentation that I wasn't aware of. So, I'm always learning about new technologies that are out there. And then obviously we have a variety of browsers and the constantly evolving guidelines, which we know we're moving to, WCAG 2.1. I think they spoke of it yesterday in the legal. So that has some more regulations building on top of it. And we know there's also a level AA, or, the 2.0, but it has AAA. So there's a lot of different guidelines too that we need to make sure that we adhere to. So, and these guidelines can often be subjective. So what might seem very accessible to one individual may not be to another. And so it's a very gray area. There's a lot to cover, a lot we need to know, and a lot of work we need to do. And what I did was just put down sort of, what I've talked about a little bit, and even Aaron alluded to. There's a lot of impact factors. So if you put the user in the middle of a Venn diagram with 4 circles, if you will, one representing the disabilities, as I mentioned, the different disabilities that the user comes to the technology with. It's the device that they're using. It could be iOS or Android. It could be desktop, mobile, or tablet. And there's a variety of browsers, and then there's all the different assistive technologies that could be used. So not only could it differ by individual, but it could differ by an individual at any period of time during their day. So just kind of a thing to think about as the user's coming to that content with all of these different elements as they're approaching it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about like I said, the processes and transformations that content goes through before it is even consumed to the end user at that point. So let's take a journey and follow the content. There are many variations, but what I'd like to walk through today is a typical example of how a peer-reviewed journal article moves from its initial creation through to publishing to the end user. And what I'm showing here is a circle of arrows counterclockwise with leading into each other around 5 different partners. I'm calling them partners in our ecosystem, starting with the researcher, or basically the content creator, moving to publishers with their submission guidelines and such, and then to discovery aggregators like EBSCO, through to the libraries and institutions, and then finally into the user. So there's a lot of different moving parts here, and a lot of coming at the content from different perspectives. And along the way, as it goes through this continuum, the idea is to enhance the content and augment the content so that it's more findable and usable, or as many might be familiar with the POUR acronym, perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And on the screen is an image of a gear with 4 quadrants, and each of the 4 representing the the POUR guidelines. These guidelines and success criteria for WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, are organized around these 4 principles, which lay the foundation for necessary for anyone to access web content. So each of these 4 is what we need to keep in mind as we're thinking about the content as we're working with it through this continuum. It needs to be perceivable, and users must be able to perceive the information that's being presented. Operable, users must be able to operate the interface in order to get to that content. They need to, be able to get to it. Then it's understandable, that they must be able to understand the information as well as the operation of the interface. And robust, and users must be able to access the content as technologies develop and advance. And that's what I was talking to you about, the many different types of technologies that are evolving in this space. And so when it comes to data, things like indexing and parsing, linking, tagging, augmenting, creating tables of contents, descriptions, multimedia, and generally multiple ways to represent the content, they're all contributing to these principles of POUR: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So we're going to start with the, in the series of arrows, the first point is the creation of content. So we're starting with the author. On the screen is, it's just a screenshot of an individual working at a table, along with a screenshot of a Microsoft document. In that document, there is a table, and then there's a diagram. And I recently walked through the process of submitting a publication, so I think this is a pretty typical experience. As you're creating the manuscript for submission for publication, formats may vary, but generally a lot are created within Word. It's pretty common. And then you can see the complexities come in when authors embed multicolored scatter plot diagrams or multivariate 3-dimensional drawings. And so there's some examples on the screen of that. And so many times the text below might explain the details, but not always as thoroughly as the graphic representation. The peer-reviewed articles are also quite lengthy, so most authors in submission requirements request a way to break it up into sections, such there's an abstract, a methodology, findings, and conclusion, and that kind of thing. So as you're creating your manuscript, you're thinking of all of these things to include in. The next slide is of a screenshot where I'm showing Microsoft Word again. As Aaron also mentioned in Office 365, they provide the ability to add accessibility tags such as alt text to embedded diagrams. So the screenshot has a Microsoft Office document with an image in there with the, if you right-click, if you're using the mouse, but otherwise there's a menu that you can go through Microsoft Word to get to an option to edit alt text. So that the capability is there for users to, who are creating manuscripts to want to add that alt text to their images. The next screen is similar, but it's saying how if you use headings in your Microsoft Word document, they will form the table of contents for sighted users and non-sighted users. So there's actually headings that you can leverage within Microsoft Word that would make headings within the content itself and data that can be used by screen readers. So it creates a table of contents as well. It sections off the data, if you will. If you just use regular fonts and highlight and change, font size and things like that in your document, it will not capture it in this way. But using the headings in this way will actually be leveraged later. So doing that when you're creating the manuscript, the capability is there, which is exciting. And I also have just a little quick a screenshot I grabbed from WebAIM's screen reader survey. And basically all it is a pie chart that shows, and all you need to know is sort of there's a big percentage, about 70% of that shows that the most common way that screen readers navigate is through headings. So just this simple element alone, if you're using Microsoft Word and creating a manuscript or a document and using the headings feature, that document will allow those headings to be available to screen reader users, and that's a large population of them that you will be able to give access to that content. The next screen is another shot of Microsoft Word, and it shows that check accessibility feature that Aaron mentioned also. It's a built-in accessibility checker in Microsoft 365. So That is in most of Microsoft's programs now. So I'm showing just a quick screenshot of PowerPoint. You can do it in PowerPoint as well. It does a check all the way through for accessibility and flags areas that needs to be addressed, whether you need to add alt text or remove blank spaces and things like that. And most of you might know that I'm also showing a screenshot of a manuscript in Adobe, PDF. And Adobe actually has a lot of capabilities, a pretty robust way to do an accessibility check and make your document more accessible. So all of this is built into a lot of Microsoft Office tools for 365, as well as the PDF Adobe. But although many of these tools have the ability to leverage accessibility tags, often they're left unused. And I have a picture of a sad dog because unfortunately they're not always used. And the main reason is likely because people don't know the capability is available. And I'm glad at Southern New Hampshire that you're introducing that to staff and students so that it will be more maybe visible for them to take advantage of. Most of them are probably, I mean, if they know that's available, I'd hope that they're using it. They may be deterred because it is a little bit time consuming sometimes, but I think we all know that it's worth that effort. And there may be some consideration, I was thinking of offering even, classes for that. I'm hoping that students upcoming will start to learn to use these as they're creating their documents in their classes so that they'll be better citizens and workers in the future. So the capability is there, it's getting there in a lot of these work tools, and that's a very exciting thing. What we really need to do now is make sure that people are trained and know how to use them. And I know there are a lot of courses available out there to introduce you to these tools. So the next screen is, again, that circle of arrows, and we've moved from the content creators to the publishers. So in order to complete your manuscript, you need to upload it into your publisher system. So as we're working our way through that ecosystem, submission guidelines are often included, reference to accessibility. And on the screen, I'm just showing the Journal of Interactive, actually my screen's blocked a little bit, but it's just a simple journal. And a lot of the journals, when they have submission guidelines for people to submit articles, they'll provide accessibility guidelines, and the guidelines will, give an indication of, how to add descriptors for, alt text and how to provide transcripts for media and all of that. So there's a lot moving into the submission process and the guidelines, which is exciting. But then once you actually need to upload your document into manuscript or publisher software, it's usually an automated process, and it has different options, but it probably varies by publishers in terms of what and how elements are uploaded. And this is an example of one I had used, and it allows you to enter the title, upload the document, and then it asks for the figures separately. So although I had embedded figures with alt text into my manuscript, the publisher software required me to separate them out. So I separated them out, but the content was in JPEG, and the JPEG, it didn't allow me to add any alt text within the actual publisher software. So if I entered it, it might be lost there. And maybe there was a capability in the software, but I wasn't aware of it or couldn't find it to do that, unfortunately. It allows you to include captions, which is very good. But then the caption is really just the title of the figure. It really isn't the alt text which describes the content and what you're trying to convey within that particular figure. So, in this scenario, a lot of the accessibility information wasn't necessarily captured, and it's an important question in terms of what the publisher software includes and allows. Are tags if their tags are included in your manuscript, can they be passed along? If you want to add tags as part of the submission process, can you? Is there any type of check or navigation headings? I'd imagine that it likely varies across publishers in terms of what can be submitted. So there are guidelines, and then there's the technology to support that needs to be considered, within the publisher's process. And then there's the aspect of even encouraging inclusion or even making it required. So you can actually see it. You can't maybe proceed to the next step without maybe putting a certain tag in or checking for certain headings or such. So that's just something to consider. And then the data is generally, the publisher is compiled and transformed for distribution. And it goes through a number of steps. And from an editing and peer review process, as you know, this is sort of the back and forth about the content when individuals are reviewing the content for the manuscript. But it might be also a good place for these conversations to occur about complex tables, figures, and graphs, and the best way to represent data analysis. So maybe if the software doesn't necessarily support it, if there's encouragement to include as much detail as possible in the text of the manuscript, then that might suffice for that particular need. So I think there are ways that you can work within the process to make sure that that content is made accessible. You just have to find the areas to best include it. There's obviously metadata that's extracted, descriptive text, headings, and sections. Those are the things that you can look for. Figures and tables, if they are built in, do they have the proper structure to identify rows and columns for certain tables and that? And then obviously layout and design, if it is PDF, and are you looking at font and font size and the shading and the color scheme and all of that? So there's a lot to think about on that end. Oh, I think I went back. Moving forward. So again, here's just the ecosystem with the arrows moving from the content creators to the publishers and then to the discovery aggregators like EBSCO. So the formats we generally receive our content in is XML, which is structured data, a PDF, which is probably the predominant one we receive right now, and then scanned PDF, which is just a scanned image of PDF. So it's usually in those three. Like I said, PDF is still probably the larger size of what we receive today. But just to show you, the next slide is a little bit of, it's a grid of the benefits of XML. So this is what we're more pushing, whether it's EPUB for ebooks or XML or other structured types of data. There's so much more that we can do and make accessible with that level of data. So receiving data in either, historically PDF, like I said, was more what we're getting. We're starting to see more XML come through, particularly from the larger publishers. But from an accessibility standpoint, XML is much more friendly for us to work with. Reflowable text allows for easy viewing regardless of the device. It's responsive. Allows for modals, pop-ups to adjust very well to large magnification without any issue for those using magnifiers. It's easier to be read by screen readers or any text-to-speech software. Allows for linkages, within the data itself if you want to link out, whether it's to pictures or audio, just to have that multimodal learning. It improves reading order. You can take out the advertisements that are sometimes in the middle of a page of PDF. And it increases the capability for translations, which helps non-native English speakers. Much easier for highlighting, note-taking, a lot of those other types of features. So there's a lot more benefit in what we can do with the XML format. And here's just a little bit about PDF processing and how we process the different data. PDF, as I said, is a little bit more limited. We get about 50% in issue level, so we actually have to manually split it apart internally. We have to extract some of the metadata like the abstract and the authors. Because we have the issue level, we can create a table of contents for the issue for all the articles, but we can't do very much within the article itself. We do extract some data and assign some data, such as source type or subject headings or geography or language, all that stuff so that you can actually filter. If you think of the left panel when you're doing searches in Discovery, we can add and augment a lot in that way. And many articles that we receive, like I said, in PDF may have advertisements in the middle of it, or often there are multiple articles on an existing page. So if a text-to-speech or screen reader is going through, it might start in the middle of a previous article, and your article that you're interested in might not be, it might be in the middle of the page, and you have to go through the page to actually find it. So just some of the constraints that are around PDFs. And XML has a lot more fluidity, allows you to identify the navigation headings using, if they're not headings provided directly, as long as they're indicated in some way, like section type field, we can break up the article into sections for easier navigating. Obviously, if there's any captions or alt text, we can always leverage that. And also, we can see how tables are represented. So rows, columns, we can actually display it properly in an HTML environment if it's given to us in this type of format, and we can augment it and improve on it. So the next page is just basically a UI rendering of what HTML or PDF looks like. But from an experience standpoint, PDF is pretty much the image of the PDF, and it has the issue table of contents that you can use. So a screen reader would just read through the text directly, whereas within the HTML that we're rendering on the page, you can have headings and navigation elements within the page itself. We have a translator tool, we have a text-to-speech tool built right in, so there's a lot more fluidity of what we can do. We can highlight text, we can embed things. So that's sort of just to show the more we can do depending on the format that we get, you know, from the publishers providing the content. And then there's other third-party content providers that you have to consider, whether it's integrated, embedded content, images, videos, audio, all of that. You know, we have to make sure that our partners are providing information in an accessible way. And I just put also in here an element on impact factors and testing combination. So just to go back to that Venn diagram that had the disability, the device that users have, the browser, the assistive technology, and all of those combinations, it would be very difficult for us to test every single feature we're introducing in that way. So what we do is we leverage some of the surveys that are out there. I'm showing an example from WebAIM, which is, again, the screen reader survey that just indicates the most commonly used screen readers like JAWS, NVDA, VoiceOver, and then it has the combinations of screen reader and browser, what are the most common there, JAWS with IE, NVDA with Firefox, and then I also have a pie chart just showing how for mobile devices, Apple is the predominant device used at 75%. So at the very least, we want to make sure that we're testing in all of these scenarios before we have any feature go out. But understanding the possible numbers of combinations of all the different technologies, and this is just screen reader, not even talking about, you know, magnifiers or the Kurzweil or the read and write. So just a lot of other factors to consider before the information is even you know, rendered into the UI for the user. And I know I'm running a little bit on time. So this is sort of towards the end. In terms of the partners of the ecosystem circle, we went from content creators to publishers to aggregators, and then it goes to the library and institutions. There's actually an impact, and I really like this scenario, so I just want to read it really quickly because it's really a nice element. It's basically a small exercise. It's from the Paciello group. And the first part of the exercise asks a sighted participant to imagine opening the door of a conference room and taking in the contents by scanning the room and seeing the types of things that one would expect: a conference table, chairs, people, windows, counters with coffee pots, etc. The second part of the exercise asks the participant to open the door and imagine the lights in the room are off. The participant is then told they only have a small flashlight and they can use that to scan the objects in the room one at a time. And this is what it's like for users with assistive technology navigating an article, paper, or a web page. So I thought that was a really sort of, you know, an image you can get in your head about, you know, what the approach is from different people and how they're approaching the page and how they're looking at a page. And the impact could be in terms of as we're providing a product with the content in there, the libraries and institutions also have some capabilities of customizing. So we have to be aware of cognitive overload when we're introducing our sites to our users. And cognitive overload occurs when the volume of information supply exceeds the information processing capacity of the individual. And that can be for any individual. And on the screen, I'm just showing, it actually is EBSCO's Discovery Center, but it's with all of sort of the bells and whistles and everything on it that you could possibly add. So that's just to show that because you know, some individuals prefer to make sure that their students know all of the available possibilities for their content, but it might be overwhelming in some cases. So to think very carefully about how you customize your page and what you want to show. The second slide I'm showing is a scaled down version, which basically allows you to have access to all of that information, but it's only starting with a very slimmed down, scaled down page with more white space. So just something to think about when you're customizing the site. That also impacts the user's ability to take in the information as well. And I'm just showing some other branding elements that just show sort of the most common color blindness is, green and red, and people don't always know that. Probably Heineken doesn't, because that's the colors that they're using. And there's a lot of busy websites out there. And just to be cognizant and aware of the different colors, the contrast, and what the impact might be to somebody trying to take in that information. And then finally, it just the student receives, through that lens of that, all the impact factors of whatever technology they're using to leverage to get into the site. And what they're looking for is, do I know how to search and browse for the content? Can I read and understand what I find? How can I select it? Can I extract it in a way that's useful for my assignment? So they're coming in from all of those different devices and browsers and assistive technology, and and trying to absorb that content. So, and I just showed the impact factors, and then the partners across the ecosystem. Again, the circle just to show content creators, publishers, discovery aggregators, libraries, and then finally the student. And that we are all real partners in this ecosystem. We are all having an impact on what the user experience at the end in terms of how accessible it is, depending on what particular disability they may have and what technologies they need to use to leverage it. I just wanted to say that basically we just need to work together, and that's what we're doing today, and that's why this is really great, and we have this venue to do that, to listen to each other, to communicate, to educate others, to educate each other, and work together so that we're all optimizing all pieces of the puzzle so that the end user is getting that full experience and able to have that same content. They all have equal access to the same exact content. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I think we're going to the question answer portion, and I'm sorry I might have gone a little over my time, but I hope we have time to get to any questions that you have.
Oh, that was great. Thank you, Jill. We'd rather have you give us all your information than have to cut yourself short. So as Jill said, now we have time for questions. And I do believe there is a question slide that will have everyone's contact information on it. So we'll leave it sitting on that for a little while.
Oh, sorry. There it is.
No, that's okay. There we go. So if you haven't done so, again, please enter your questions into the question box. They can be for any of the three presenters. If it is for a specific presenter, go ahead and add their name to it. And we have, first one came in for Aaron. And the question is, Aaron, how do you do captioning for videos?
Hi, that's a great question. We have a process where we use an outside vendor, 3Play Media. So when faculty identify that they need to have a video captioned, my staff member will work with them to determine, what's already out there. Is the video, do we already have it as a captioned video somewhere else? Or do we need to actually send that out to be captioned? And that's going to vary depending on, are they using a feature film? Are they using something from YouTube? A lot of times our faculty will think, well, it's already captioned on YouTube, so it's fine. But the reality is the YouTube captioning is horrible, so that's not sufficient. So we will try to work with them to determine that. And if we have to send it out, we will pay 3Play Media to caption that for us.
Great, thank you. And then we have one for Damita or for Aaron as well. But most of our campuses do have the equivalent of your campus accessibility center, but not necessarily the equivalent of your online accessibility center. Do you have any suggestions for starting the conversations on campus to express the need to create such that? Like, where do we begin?
Hi there, this is Damita. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so to start that conversation, it still, for me, goes back to being student focused. There are accommodations and all formats on campus that may not be applicable for a student who's taking classes online. So in the interest of being totally student focused, I think the conversation still remains around, are we supporting the student in the best manner that we can? In the online space, as I had mentioned before, we have been very creative in ways to provide accessibility solutions. Sometimes there is a similarity between some accommodations between campus and online, but not necessarily. I do believe that it warrants further conversation with leadership and other stakeholders who can get behind you with resources, manning, the whole gamut. But again, the question is, are you providing a similar experience for those students who are pursuing classes online? And if the answer is no, due to accessibility, I think the conversation is definitely important and it's worth having.
Great, thank you. And then we have another question for Erin. Erin, you mentioned that you assist the librarians with assessment of new tools and databases. Can you talk a little bit more about that process? And specifically, is this done before or after the tool's been purchased?
Good question. So it's pretty much an informal process. You know, if the library faculty come to us at this point and want us to do that, we will. Usually that's around using screen readers and so forth to do some testing. Right now, in the past, it has been after the fact. You know, we've already purchased something, it's already out there and available, and we do some testing. But for anybody who attended yesterday's presentation on our EIT program, we are working to make that more proactive and before the fact. So anything that we bring in, we're starting to do testing before we purchase them rather than afterwards. So, so it's kind of a work in progress, and we're trying to be more proactive there.
Great, thank you. And then we have one more question, and this one is for Jill. Jill, what is the relationship between the XML format and the HTML page for the end user?
Sure. The XML format is how we receive the data. It's basically just structured data, which is very fielded. And what we can do is just generate the HTML from that XML. So we can take and leverage a lot of those pieces that you might have seen in the XML and create a table of contents, for example. So it had little section headings that said section for methodology, section abstract, section conclusion. We can actually take that from the XML and generate and render a table of contents that users can then click through and access into the actual article. So there's a lot we can do behind the scenes to create a more fluid UI, and those table of contents are also can be accessed by screen reader too. So you can just do a lot more when the data is in that type of a structured format. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Jill. So we're running out of time, and this will conclude our presentations for today. We did get to all of our questions, and so soon you will receive an online short evaluation form. Please take a few minutes to respond to those questions, and your comments are very valuable. They do help our Continuing Education Committee plan future events. The email will also include links to today's slides and recording, and you will now have the opportunity to receive a certificate of attendance. That information will also be in the email. And once again, thank you to all of our presenters, Damita Burner, Erin Flint, and Jill Power. And thank you to the ELECTS Continuing Education Committee, Iping Chingathi and Catherine Balek, and to the ELECTS Office Representative Megan Doherty, and again to our co-sponsor. This concludes the ELECT Spring webinar series. Webinars will resume in the fall, and please see the ELECT website for more information on those. ELECTS also has 2 pre-conference events taking place at ALA Annual on June 22nd. Please see the website for details and registration. And once again, thank you to all of our attendees for joining us today. This will conclude our session.